I'd like to call to the stage Darnell Thompson as our moderator to come to the stage. Let's give him a round of applause as he comes. Dr. Laura Lawson, Executive Dean of the School of Environmental and Biological Sciences, to come. Dr. Mara Riley, Director of the Zimmerly Art Museum. Dr. Brian Kariski, Executive Director of the Collaborative Center for Community Engagement. And I will join them on the stage. Yeah, you can clap for me. Okay. Again, as we continue into the work that's happening now on the panel, if you would like, please go ahead and find yourself on the question Padlet. As we finish the moderated portion of our panel, you'll have the opportunity to be able to ask questions, time permitting. So please feel free to do that.
Good morning. How are we doing today? All right. Can we get a little more energy? How are we doing today? Yes. We're talking about progress, right? We're in celebration. We're thinking about things. So, welcome, folks. My name is Darnell Thompson, who's he and pronouns, Assistant Director of Education. Thanks for the introduction, and thank you, folks, for the opportunity to sit with my colleagues to talk about progress. This work is super important to me. It's super important to all of the folks who are present with us. And as we gather in space and virtually, super excited to talk about what it means to be in progress, and in a moment in time that we're in the middle of Access Week, right? And what does that mean to like be in the space of access, and why there's a level of responsibility that comes along with that word of access, right? We're sitting in a space of higher education where that word access means so much, right? So I would love for us to, even as we talk today and as we talk about progress, that we also sit with the privilege of that word of access, right? And recognize folks who don't have access. Recognize the folks who access has been stolen, removed from them recently. And also those yet for us to understand where they need access. And I want us to be thoughtful about those things as we kind of continue. And our work is never done, as Dr. Butler mentioned, right? And so we're here to talk about progress and know that this work is vital to what we do here in New Brunswick around our diversity work, okay? The diversity strategic plan doesn't have a deadline, right? So I want to talk about and I want to ask my colleagues, why is it the case? Why do we think there's no set deadline or set timeline connected to our diversity strategic plan? I would love to hear from you folks.
So I think when we talk about time, typically strategic plans have a time frame. Usually they're somewhere around 5 or 10 years. But I know that as the diversity strategic plan was coming together, as the team that now looks a little bit different, but in the initial coming together, time was thought about differently because of the way that diversity initiatives and progress works. You may come up against challenges that may take you in a different directions. You may have the opportunity to work on different things at different times. And so you don't quite know all of the obstacles and challenges that will come. Sometimes progress can look like holding the line. Sometimes progress looks like moving forward in an action step. Sometimes you'll need to pivot. So I think time, a time construct is not necessary, but we can measure progress as forward, right? And so as long as we're making that incremental change in a direction, I think that's the really important part.
Yeah, anyone else want to jump in on talk about timing a little bit?
I'll add to that. I mean, I think, you know, when we're thinking about anti-sexism, anti-racism, and anti-ableism work, it's never done. And if we use like the ADA as an example, right, Americans with Disabilities Act, my sister's a quadriplegic, you know, there are no ramps she can't find parking spots the majority of the time, right? There's a constant obstacles. The work is never done for our anti-ableism work, just as an example, or anti-sexism work. We just need to use abortion as an example, how things, progress in fits and starts, how we progress and then we go backward and we progress and we go backwards. And so that work is just constant. We can't give up, right? It's just never ending, I think, the work.
Yeah, right.
And then from the community engagement perspective, New Brunswick Piscataway is blessed with a lot of small mom and pop nonprofits. And they're constantly new ones coming up. We just had our breakfast, brand new one was there. He's in the formation stages. So it's never ending. We always have challenges, and we have these small mom and pop nonprofits that need assistance that pop up. And their focus is always changing. And that's a great thing because they're facing the challenges that are coming up that Tiffany talked about. So in terms of it is never ending because we want to be there to serve our population, our community, and that's both on and off campus.
I'll just add, it's never ending, but it's also right now.
Yes.
And so if you have a deadline or if you're looking towards something in the future, you may not be paying attention to right now. And we have to kind of live the practice and do it.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting point, and to a note when I was thinking about time, because I was reflective about like this moment in time, right, and thinking about how this opportunity for us to gather is timely, but our work doesn't always have to feel time sensitive, right? Because it has to continue to keep going, right? And so it's such an important piece to this aspect of like as we think about. Where we're talking about progress, right? We're talking about the growth and advancement of like the work that we're doing, that in a moment in time where so many things are under attack. And so it is timely, but like we got to get out the space of thinking that everything needs to be time sensitive. I wonder if anyone has any thoughts to that reflection, if anyone.
Well, I think in the context of doing this work, I mean, we're ultimately working with people, and people are constantly changing. And in the world, as people interact with one another, as we're operating in the spaces that we inhabit, the world is constantly changing, and we have to change with it in terms of being sensitive to the ways in which people ebb and flow, as the ways in which people will be who they are and what that means in the way that they show up in the world. And we have to be sensitive, but also agile in those spaces, because it's a constant pursuit of learning one another. And I think learning people is probably one of the greatest acts of love and care, right, in a culture, is to be able to learn about one another and have that really be able to impact the way that you move around in a space, to be mindful one to another. So I think the timeliness and the idea of it not being time sensitive, because life is a learning pursuit, and that is time bound, but you're also, you don't know. So you do the best in the time that you are aware of that you have. Yeah,
Absolutely. Any other thoughts? Okay. Okay, cool. You bring up this piece, and it's a great segue, right? Because you're talking about being flexible and things like that. And the next question I have, hang on one second. Nope, we're all right. Next question is, I would love for folks to share a moment when it became clear to you that progress had been made, that we were moving in some sort of direction in like your unit. Were there moments where the work was difficult, in a moment where you maybe needed to pivot, to need to be a little bit more flexible? If so, and how did you adjust to make that progress?
So in terms of the community engagement, when we start our first partner breakfast, which I'll talk about this afternoon, we had 32 people, including 4 people from the collaborative, so 28 outside individuals. We now average about 85 at our partner breakfasts, and they've grown, and we were also very intentional to include our on-campus partners, because they are just as vital, they need just the same kind of support as our off-campus partners. So including them in there and helping them make those connections has been fantastic for us. In terms of pivoting, one of the things that we also noticed, and this came from Tiffany's area when Tiffany and I met when I first got here, which was there's a lot of different types of engagement, and there's a lot of different pathways to get engagement information out there. So I was asked and tasked with, let's find a way to find one simple way to get out to the entire campus and the community. And so I was tasked, I did the research, and we ended up bringing on Give Pulse, here called Our Community. So it's an easy way for our off and on-campus partners to find volunteers, for people to track information. And so we had to pivot fast and start developing education to train people. And it was originally only supposed to be for New Brunswick, but it went to all 4 campuses. And so being able to adapt it to each campus has been vital too.
I would also share too, I think initially when you think about doing work in the progress of our diversity strategic plan, number one is that the idea that it's integrated, right? That we set ourselves an ideal about who we think we are and who we want to be. I think the other part is the fact that it was integrated. That it wasn't any one place doing a thing. It was many people in a collective coming together to move forward in the areas of which they have expertise and influence and power. And so to be able to think about moving a system, particularly at this scale, for folks to be able to say, where I am, I'm going to do what I can. I think that's vitally important when we think about in the collective space. When we think about progress, I think the integration is a critical part, because even in preparing for today, the idea that there were so many to choose from that we could spotlight, to say, like, there are people all over this campus who are doing the things, particularly in a time like right now, to say that who we are and what does that mean in the context of who we are, and to look at where we've come from and let that shape kind of where we go. I think that's been critical in thinking about progress and what that looks like. I also think pushback to a certain extent lets you know about how impactful you have been. And I think right now, I will say, I think we've done well.
That resistance is so important, right? When we receive that resistance, we know, like, oh, we're making people uncomfortable, right? We're making that, and there's growth in that discomfort. Anyone else want to share about the things that they've had, like the pivot and things like that? Thoughts?
I can speak to that a little
Yeah,
bit.
sure.
I think, the Zimmerly is outward-facing as an institution, and so our progress is often determined by, it's quantitative, right? Like, what's our audience numbers? Are we increasing annually? And I think we've done phenomenally well over the last 3 years, but it dawned on me, this is when we pivoted, about a year ago, when I realized that we weren't really seeing a lot of like local audiences come in. So we're seeing staff, we're seeing faculty, we're seeing students especially. But knowing that, 47% of New Brunswick is Latinx, is an audience that we were not tapping into. And so, I applied for a grant, and we've now instituted a bilingual museum initiative. And now we're seeing huge numbers of people coming in from the Latinx community that have never been to the museum. And they're coming back, right? So to me, pivoting sometimes is just what's happening, right? What am I missing out on here, right? And again, when you're looking at quantitative analysis for a museum, who's not coming? And so I think that's also kind of work that needs to be done as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to commend you for those efforts and things like that. I've actually seen them and have partnered with like some of the folks that you've done in like the community work too as well. And so like lifting that work is super important, especially for our community members, right? As a university that sits in this space, right? We understand what the impact can be and what might be some of the reputations that Rutgers might have within the community with local folks, to build that space of access, to build that space of connection to the community is super important, right? And then when we're talking about access, what does it mean to go to a place and be able to know that your language is spoken, to be able to read things in your languages and things like that? That's super important. So I'm glad for the work that you're doing in that space. It reminds me to think that like how sometimes we have to take pause to be reflective and when we're talking about our pivoting, and that like when we pivot, there has to be a level of diligency that comes along with that. Like we're not gonna sit in that frustration, but we're gonna be resolved in the work that comes along with that. And if this work was easy, it would already be done, right? You know what I mean? Like, and so we have to continue to kind of keep doing those things. And so as I have you folks here sitting on this panel, I want to think about the work that you've done, right? So I want to talk, what's really one of the, and we kind of talked about it, but what's one initiative that you're really also proud of, right? Like, is it, you kind of more talked about like that level of like, I'm proud of like this thing that we've done as we pivoted. But what's an initiative that other folks are really proud of in your work and the impact that it has had on advancing equity, inclusion, and diversity?
Good morning. So I was thinking about, as everyone was talking, pivoting, and I can't help but think about basketball and not traveling. So one of the things that we have done, and so I'm the Dean of the School of Environmental and Biological Sciences and the Ag Experiment Station, and we have faculty all over the state. And we have been very fortunate the last few years to do a lot of new faculty hiring. So instead of pivot, in some ways for us, it has just been like evolution of it. Because we started out with mandatory stride training. Very difficult. People were kind of resistant. Yes, thank you, Crystal. Very resistant. But one of the things that we had that was different maybe is we have external people on our search committees because we are the experiment station, and it was super important to have them go through stride training because they started understanding Rutgers better and what our priorities and our values are. And we're then bringing that into how they saw these roles that quite often could be much more transactional. You know, you need someone that's going to do pest management. It's like, no, we need a faculty member who's going to be engaged in Rutgers and in the values of Rutgers doing pest management. So I think that was a really important evolution that has now been, it's now a foundation, right? That is an assumed piece. And we've also seen in the process of doing faculty hiring, just stronger and stronger attention to inclusive outreach and recruitment, to thanks to Troy, much more attention to diversity action plans, or sorry, I just said it wrong, diversity statements and how to interpret them and how to include them in how we do candidate evaluation. And so it is kind of like we're to your point earlier, we're learning as we go, and it's getting stronger and better as a result. I don't think I would have thought we'd be where we are now 3 years ago. I didn't want to, it's not like you do stride and check a box. It's like that was a tool, and then now we're going to the next step, and then we go to the next step, and then we go to the next step. And I think one of the things that I'm really excited about, and I just want to give a shout out to Troy, who's our Associate Dean of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, for all of his work in this space, is we are making an impact on the diversity of our faculty as a result of it, particularly in cooperative extension, which reflects the state of New Jersey, which is what we're supposed to be doing. So that was long-winded, but I think it's a great thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're talking about, and I'm going to come down to you too, Brian, but you're talking about like building it into the fabric, right? You're building it into the fabric of what you do. And I think so often we've always been in this space of thinking about like, how do we include it? Like, how are we putting it into like things? And what we really need to do is think about our processes, dismantle them, and build it into the fabric. So that way, when things are under attack, right, that folks are not pointing to these things, but it's already built into like what we do. And like, this is a framework and how we do our work, right? Go ahead, Brian, sorry. That was great.
So one of the programs is one that has been in the collaborative for quite some time. And two people oversee it, and they're sitting in the back, right back there, Rebecca Gordado and Abby Cox, is our Bonner Leader program. And when I started, there was only 32 in there. And Rebecca revised the entire program. And the Bonner Leader program takes students who are on federal work study, and they work in the community or with outwardly facing organizations on the campus, and that's where they do their hours. So they're doing community engagement work. And through their efforts, it has grown to now 50 students each year. They're in the community, and they're helping these small organizations to the point now where I think for next year, I'm going to scan back there, I think I'm about right. It's like there's 12 new requests for Bonner Leaders for the fall. Yeah. And so it's grown, and it's helping our community partners. It's helping the on-campus partners really connect in the community. So I'm proud of that because, again, a lot of these are small mom and pops that are run by women of color. And so they're making these impacts, and our students are learning and are really engaging in the community for really positive reasons.
Oh, okay. Oh, I didn't know if you were getting the mic. It's so important that we think about, and I think, seeing these things and knowing how these efforts are ingrained in not only the community, right? Because, when people talk about higher education and how we situate ourselves, and sometimes there can be a lot of resources that we take from the community, right? But like that ability to be able to give back, that ability for our students to be able to see how we're invested in the spaces in our community outside of, Rutgers, outside of the bubble is vital, right? To thinking about this work, right? And as my prompt in the beginning was to talk about access and who doesn't have access, and we're breaking down those particular barriers, right? And so that's what I'm hearing from all of you, and I think that those things are really phenomenal. And so as we talk really engage and formulate in how we engage with community, what's one thing that you wish the Rutgers community knew about making progress towards a more inclusive campus? What's something that you really want folks here presently who watch this video, live streaming, what do you want the Rutgers community to know about making progress and towards a more inclusive community?
I guess I can start first. I think for me, recognizing that in the present moment, you may feel frustrated, you may feel a lot of things. I would say to feel the feelings, take the breaks, listen to yourself, take the breaks that you need to be able to continue in the work. This is not a sprint, this is a marathon, right? This is about not only being able to do the work right now, but doing the work for the long run takes a certain amount of self-care, and to be able to, in continuing to move forward, and being kind to yourself in the context of what it means to move forward. And so when we think about action and we think about hitting specific goals or being able to make progress, it's being able to see where the incremental changes have come, and being able to pause and reflect on that, celebrate it, acknowledge it, and then continue to be sensitive to the things that are happening around us to know what the path forward can continue to look like and who needs to be next to you as you make those steps. Because this is not work that we can do alone. This is not work you should do alone. And I would dare to say can't do alone. And so to be able to put one foot in front of the other, lock arms with someone, and then that other person next to you locking arms with someone else, I think we have the capacity to do tremendous things, but it first starts with the ability to care for oneself, to be kind to oneself, but also to do it in community.
Any other thoughts?
I was going to add the community piece to it, and I think the other, because I'm a landscape architect, I can't help but think that we need to intentionally have spaces that we can come together for community. I think more than ever, we need to get together like this, but because it does feel like the world is on attack, right? Or it feels like you're alone, and I think it's going to be super important for us, for our students, for the community to feel like Rutgers is a place to come together. And even though we are going to have difficult conversations, we have to have them, and we have to have them in a safe space. One of the things that we're really working on the Cook campus is our edges, in a way. We're one of the open, like we're a big park open space for the community. I mean, we want people to come in, and we want it to feel like Rutgers is part of New Brunswick, and then we can have those conversations and make sure that we don't kind of create these divides that the news media is kind of starting to make, and other things about what a university is or what higher ed is, and that we are all one community kind of addressing the same issues.
Y'all bring up such interesting points, and I have one more question for y'all, right? But I want to talk about this aspect of community and why it's essential. One of the things I wrote down as we prepared today was, and especially as we talk about community, specifically here at Rutgers, is this aspect of coalition building. And I think that's another layer to like this level of work. My students will tell you that I tell them all the time, justice work is done in community. Like, you cannot do justice work without other folks, right? And so that takes a level of coalition. That takes a level of building co-conspirators. That takes a level of finding folks who will advocate with you, for you, in moments of struggle, right? And so one of the last questions was kind of already hinted at, but I want to reframe it, so I'm throwing a curveball. Ooh, y'all ready? So I'm going to ask the question as is framed, but then I'm going to add a caveat to it. And so the question is, how have partnerships that you've made across Rutgers or with local communities enhanced the impact of your diversity efforts? In the vein of thinking about coalition building, what are also some partnerships that you want to develop to continue your work?
I think in the context of coalition building and partnerships to be developed, even though I'm picking up the mic, I'm thinking a lot about what does it mean to be in community, to be an institution of higher education that is not just in a community, but of a community. And so I think about where are we located, right? I think about the state of New Jersey. I think about advocacy, not only in the spaces that we inhabit on campus within actual New Brunswick, but I also think about, particularly in the time that we are, advocacy in the legislative space, right? What does it look like for us to be actively working toward our inclusion goals related to coalition building in that particular space? I think and I guess I put a shout out, we have someone coming, I think next week on the 25th, Dr. Erica Friedman is here and can probably tell you a little bit more information about what's coming later in terms of the path forward, and a talk from a legislator about what we can do. But I think some of those spaces are really important, but then also, I guess maybe I'll pass it over to Brian to talk a little bit more about what does it look like to not just be in a community, but of it.
For us in the collaborative, for us to think forward, Rutgers is such a large institution, and I was talking with someone from Rutgers Global. God, this is back in September, and I was talking to her, and I explained what the collaborative did, and she's like, "I've been here for 16, 17 years. I've never heard of the collaborative, and I'm still learning of places every day." And then I started reflecting on it. I'm like, granted, I've been here for 3 years. I'm still learning a lot. People who have been here a long time. Rutgers has so many hidden gems and a lot of offices that I'm trying to invite to our partner breakfasts because they're making those connections. Our community partners, especially the small ones who serve underrepresented populations, they sometimes see a barrier around Rutgers because of the town gown, which doesn't exist, but in their minds it does. And so trying to have our offices connect with those nonprofits, with those small organizations, because we're here for our students. And our students can make that impact in the community. And research consistently shows students who are engaged in community engagement work, it's a high impact practice, when they graduate, they go into their communities wherever they live, and they make those impacts. They're solving the problems locally. And so therefore, we should be doing that. And for me, success and seeing things move forward are our students engaging in the community, either curricularly or co-curricularly, and making that impact and helping smaller organizations, and then also connecting our faculty staff with these organizations, because either through the classroom or in their personal time, they can make that impact and make a difference.
I can pick up on the coalition building aspect of it. So one of the things that we're particularly proud of at the Zimmerly is something called Spark Nights, which are, thank you.
Shout out to Spark
Thank you,
Nights.
shout out. So for those of you that don't know, I expect you at the next one, but they're first Thursdays of every month. And I changed them when I arrived so that they're specific to the, whatever the monthly designation is. So we have Black History Month, we have Women's History Month, we have Native American, disability awareness, and so forth. And it's so amazing. And I know, I'm looking at some of you that I know were at the Black History Month just a few weeks ago. But it's all about coalition building, because we co-create the programming with students. And we co-create it with community partners and some of the centers and institutes across Rutgers. And so these students coming together from different groups, right? From the Mexican Student Association or the Rutgers Turtle Club of indigenous, students as well, so on and so forth, are coming together and working together on programming that's really, really meaningful to them. I think one of them that's particularly fun is Gapril. Where we have got Gapril going. We have a drag show every year. I mean, and they're so excited, and they're building friendships. Some of the students I know have told me, just confessed to me, they're like, I haven't even come out yet, right? And here I am at Gapril, having the time of my life, right? That's what we want to see at the museum, and so coalition building is really critical to what we're trying to do.
I just want to add, the other group for collaboration is our faculty. So many of the faculty at SCBS are really struggling right now because they do the things that are being caught up in the federal changes. If the faculty can't get together around this, they're holding all of their fears about their entire careers, particularly the pre-tenure faculty, inside. And so I think the other piece is that we have really great collaborations across faculty. So we have the collaboratories, we have the Rutgers Climate and Energy Institute. Those institutes are part of this effort, right? Because it is a very diverse group of faculty committed to Rutgers and scared about the future of their research and their scholarship. And I think that that's another space that we really need to talk about collaboration, because they're here for the long haul. They want to stay at Rutgers because this is a really great place to be. They love our students, but the sand is shifting underneath them if they're better together in that work.
Yeah, that's a piece that we also can't minimize, right? The attack on scholarship, right? The attack on knowledge, right? And so even as we think about our advocacy work in serving our student population, community partners, and things like that, there's attack on folks who are producing knowledge. And so I think there's also something to be said around, having access to that, right? That opportunity of the production of knowledge, and also being able to disseminate that. But when it's work that is grounded and rooted in sharing the experience of folks on the margins, we have to also advocate for that too as well. That research is important, right? And so these are also aspects that we can't leave out of our conversations too as well. Some of our great faculty and doing phenomenal work, if that work then is not elevated, if that work is then taken away, if we don't have access to those knowledge bases, that then creates ripple effects to the student experience. That then creates ripple effects to our community partners too as well. And so it's like I said, it's super important to think about how do we build coalitions, how do we understand that this fight is not just the fight of folks in a quote-unquote DEI space, right? That this is an effort and a fight to preserve and create spaces, right? No matter where those spaces are going to be created down the line. We don't even know yet, but it's all about making sure we have the ability to have access to those spaces. I want to thank you folks for your perspectives, for your thoughts, And I want to thank you folks for being present with us too today, and understanding that like the work that we are charged to do is heart work, right? Heart work. I'll make sure I'm specific, right? That this work is hard work. And one of my oldest mentors told me that very early on in my career. And as I have had the opportunity to sit with these folks and do this work and think about, DEI from a strategic standpoint, it's really been valuable to me to just sit in space with y'all and learn from you all. And just commit differently to this work. And so I want to thank you all for your insights, the work that you do, the collaborations that we continue to keep having, and for all of you folks to know that the work, and as you engage with each other in community today, that we can coalition build today, right? We can start that process today with each other to figure out ways forward, right? We are elevating the progress of progress, access, right? But this is the opportunity to be timely as we sit, but understand that this work is the long haul. So I want to thank you folks for the opportunity to sit in this panel with you, and excited for the rest of the day that we have ahead. Thank you.
Darnell.
We'll take one or two questions from the Padlet, and if there are folks who are in the room, we can go ahead from there. I think we have mic runners for the folks who are in the room to be able to ask the question. Yeah? So one question coming from the Padlet is, how is this moment similar and different to past instances of resistance, and how do we anticipate responding? I know for myself, I think as, I guess, interim vice chancellor and being in this space in this moment right now, I think ultimately the thing that we have to rely on in this particular time is remembering who we are. Right? As I think about President Holloway's messages to us over the course of these past couple of weeks, and also Chancellor Conway's messages to us, number one, we have to remember who we are. We are Rutgers, and what is our mission, and what are our values, and what does that mean in the context of the work that we do, but really remembering who you are in the context of the work that you do is going to be critically important, because that's ultimately where you find kind of that purpose and that foundation for how you continue to find a path forward. And so how do you respond? I mean, you respond in the way that is true to who you are. And so that looks like being the kind of people that are not just moving beyond words, not just doers of saying one thing and doing something else, but saying a thing and then also doing that thing. And so responding with consistency. And so I don't know if there are other folks who have thought processes about that on the stage, but I think that's where I'm landing.
Yeah, I always have thoughts. Actually, this is actually really timely to like my experience. I literally was just I was literally in California a day ago, and we were having this conversation. I was at a conference, and we were talking about folks. We love to do this as people, right? To compare, right? What is this stage, or what is this moment in time, and how does this compare to other former acts of resistance, right? And one of the things that I've been sitting with in reflecting for the past few months is that as someone who looks at the past to help guide a way forward, to think about a way forward, is that these things are not new, right? We're not living in the worst of times, right? We can acknowledge that. We're not living in the worst of times. There's obviously a ton of work to do, right? And so, when we talk about, strategies around resistance, and we talk about the ways in which we need to potentially shift our work, I'm thoughtful of the abolitionist approaches of the past, of being able to be in collection, to be in community with folks, and understand that we are guided by the same principle of what is right and what's just. And so those are the things that I would imagine that can be similar, but the strategy to get there looks just a little bit differently. We receive and we access information in a way that we've never in the past. And so we can disseminate, we can share, we can collectively gather in a way that can look super different nowadays. And so I think that's something that I've been grappling with, been in reflection with, and then also strategically have been dropping those seeds with students. Because students are very much in an uproar, and they're very much in a space of anxiety, and so they need some of this like grounding. And I think that's a very grounding practice to be thoughtful of, like, okay, let's acknowledge the fact that there is a past here, and then also how we move forward just needs to shift a little bit differently. And our advocacy and the work that we do and protest and all of these things can look completely different. And we need to create space for all of that to exist with our young people so they can understand and learn those things that it doesn't always have to be how we view it on like the 15 seconds of like social media of like this big thing. Our little things also matter too.
I think this is one for the entirety of the panel. And so, how are you staying resilient? How are you staying resilient? Pause.
Are we? I mean, I think you got at it there. Tiffany, was self-care. Right? I mean, I think that's at the heart of it. And if there is no self-care, I mean, I find I fall apart at this moment. I mean, to be honest, we could try to be hopeful, but I'll be really honest with you, I'm not. So I'm really scared right now in this moment. And I actually, you said it's not the worst. I'm worried about the future. So I'm having a hard time being resilient. I'll be really honest with you.
I would also say, I guess in response to that, when we're talking about self-care, it's also being mindful and caring and holding accountable people around us, right? So I think as we were getting together and beginning the day, Laura, you asked me, how are you doing? And I gave my normal, it's Wednesday, I'm doing good. Yeah, I'm doing good. Everything's fine, everything's going good. And then she paused and she stopped me and she said, how are you actually doing? And I think it's those kinds of moments that I was like, oh, well, I'm okay. And I had a chance to be a little bit more reflective with myself, knowing that in my mind, I'm like, oh, there's a cascade of things that I need to do today to manage myself, to manage my feelings, to deal with the fears, right? Because in not feeling the feelings, we do ourselves a disservice. By not checking in on one another, we do our collective selves a disservice. And so I think it's care, right? A community, a culture of care is how we continue to move forward. It's how we stay resilient in these moments, but also we spend the time being clear about who we are, what we are purposed to do, what are the things that we have control over, and we work in those directions. And so I think it's that for me, those things.
Obviously, still self-care is huge. Coming from the Irish Catholic background, where it was imbued in us by my grandmother and by my mother, is checking in with others. How are you doing? Checking in. And I found talking with students, talking with colleagues, and finding out, how are you doing, and hearing their hopes for the future makes me feel better, because then I know that the spark is still out there. And I don't want to go to a dark place, but I will say it that, my husband and I have, hate to say, a backup plan. My mother was born in Ireland, so I'm a dual national. And I'm very lucky, and I have an Irish passport, so I can fly overseas. My husband can come with me, and we can work overseas. So we have a backup plan. We don't want to do it, but we are thinking about the future, but a lot of it is talking with others and hearing the hope from the others, especially our students. They are very hopeful about the future because they want to get past this major roadblock. But not all of them. Some of them are very scared. But as we talk with them and we can have those discussions about, how can you make the world better? They want to make the world better. So that makes me feel better too.
But they need the tools to
Yeah, they need the tool. They do need the tools.
I'll just say that I laughed when the question was asked because 5 minutes from now it'll be a different answer. I think that it's this roller coaster, right? Sometimes I am the warrior in front of, in the battle. Sometimes I am the mom who's terrified for her kids. Sometimes I am sad. Sometimes I am hopeful, and I think we have to just acknowledge that it's not one thing. We have to be all the different parts of ourselves as we're going through this. And so it's more than self-care to me. It's actually just kind of like patience with myself because I don't, like yesterday I was getting my hair cut and I just downloaded on my hairdresser and I have no idea why. But then I call my kids and I'm like, everything's gonna be fine, honey, everything's gonna be fine, right? So I think we have to acknowledge that we're all kind of going through this roller coaster. And the other thing so Vicki Banyard's in the back, and she recommended a book called 4,000 Weeks, which I've been listening to in the car, and it really just keeps me in the present. So for me right now, I need to be in the present because it's calming that I have to be in my values right now if I'm gonna do what I wanna do in the future. And I think that's really helping me.
That's great. I love that too, because there's a mindfulness piece, but then the part that really resonates is that aspect of community care, right? Well, self-care is important, but community care also can be super vital. And if that's your hairdresser or my barber getting all of the things that's this is what's going on for me right now, that's a part of your community, right? And it's really interesting because, Adwell, you talked about someone asking, how you really doing? And shout out to Dr. Collier because she came for me earlier too. Literally saying, when are you gonna rest? And I was like, I got a couple of weeks of going first before I'm thinking about rest. But shout out to Dr. Collier, always holding me accountable to make sure that I take care of myself. But it's important, right? Because that's another level of community care, right? And we need those people, right? In our workspaces, in our personal lives, right? Barber, hairdresser, all of those things, family members, right? So that we know that we can sustain, right? And we need to have those outlets too, right? And so I appreciate you saying that because that's really put to me there. Are there any other questions from the audience?
I know this may primarily pertain to my program working with high school students, but there's more of a limitation on the verbiage that we can use and things of that nature. So what would you recommend with everything going on and talking about advocacy and self-care for us to do with our high school students?
I think with high school students, you're at a really important phase of life when you're in high school. You're making decisions about all manner of things that are coming up about whether or not you want to go to college, what do you want to do, what do you want to study, who do you want to be, and then you're still trying to figure out who you actually are, and that in beginning in that process, kind of maybe could be mid-stage, depends. I think number one, being clear about the fact that who that student is not wrong, right? The fact that they're exploring, thinking, challenging the world and what it means to be who they are is, I think, is a really important thing to do. I remember as I was coming up, my mother was, and my father, well, both of those butlers, they were out there making sure that I heard the good things about me, and I heard about the things that I could be, and if there were barriers, we talked through it. They held space for me to be able to talk through my concerns. They held space for me to talk about my dreams, and they never squashed them. They held space for me to be able to shoot for the stars, right? To really be able to think about saying, I know this might sound a little bit wild, but here's where I'm at. And they held space. There was no judgment. They listened and they did not judge. And so maybe, I guess, I don't know. my parents maybe a little bit of judgment, but they still helped. They still helped in the context of being able to try and figure out who I am, and now I think is built foundationally on what kind of things they allowed for me to explore when I was growing. And so I think being able to offer space for students to be able to question, being able to offer space for students to be able to find their words. I mean, talking about the things that are happening in the world in a way that they can understand. I think right now, as we're navigating this very difficult time, I think part of the issue that we could address with high school students is to be able to talk more about the ways in which things work, how systems have come to be, how systems currently work, and what does it look like to be able to disrupt systems, right? Because again, I think sometimes people are coming from a place of just not knowing. And so number one, holding space for them to be who they are and affirming that, but also being able to make sure that you're teaching them about the way that the things work, so that they have space to be able to figure out, like, well, is that reasonable? And they have that good critical thinking sense to be able to say yes or no and move in a direction that makes sense for them in the pursuit of their goals.
I just want to add, I think the other piece is more kids are not going to have necessarily the same resources as we currently have if things are going the way that they're going. And we have to kind of create supports and safe spaces for students, high school students, college students, who maybe won't be able to easily access an agency, health care, and financial support, and other things that we need. One of the things that Troy's been really wonderful for students is an emergency fund, for example. And I think we need to think that way. Our students will be in emergency situations, probably at a different scale than recently. And so I think we have to think kind of create this supportive environment, but also be prepared for being the advocates and providing those kinds of emergency supports that our students may be needing, financially, healthcare, legally, all sorts of different aspects.
Oh, no. No, I think we're in a good place. I feel like being able to think about not only the emotional and the care support around a student, and also thinking about the practical structural supports. I mean, those are the critical pieces. That's the way that we make it through. Because again, if there are situations where things are not going to be available, how do we make sure that folks get the things that they need? And it's in those ways. So I appreciate you sharing those things. I do think right now we are at time. And so I appreciate your time and attention, and for all the folks who are on stage. So let's give them another round of applause.